بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وسندنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, welcome to our 14th lesson from our lessons on Akhlaq, in which we are discussing the text Al-Akhlaq al-Adudiya by the great Imam Abdul Rahman bin Ahmad bin Abdul Ghaffar al-Iji al-Shirazi rahimahullah ta'ala wa nafa'ana bihi wa bi'ulumihi fi ad-darain. So last lesson we spoke about the first three preconditions to wisdom, and we spoke about the vices of deficiency and vices of excess related to those preconditions. The first one being clarity of mind, the second one being good understanding, and the third one being quick-wittedness. Right, where we have the clarity of mind referring to one's mind being free of confusion, and then the second one, good understanding, in which one's mind has correct movement, as in one's mind, the activity of one's mind occurs in a correct way. Right, as in, we took the example of when someone hears 5 plus 5, they immediately think about 10 as opposed to anything else. And then the third precondition is quick-wittedness, in which this happens in a quick way. Now the fourth precondition to wisdom is what we call husnul tasawwur, or excellence of intellection. And what is husnul tasawwur? It is al-bahthu an al-ashya' biqadri ma hiya alayh, namely the examination of things to an appropriate extent. So let's read a little bit what one of the commentators says about this. He says here, what does it mean? Right? What does it mean to examine things to an appropriate extent? أي بلا إهمال شيء مما هو داخل فيها وإدخال شيء مما هو خارج عنها. Right? Without neglecting something which belongs in that discussion, nor entering anything which doesn't belong in that discussion. Right? So, but part of that, actually, this is very important, part of that is that one actually recognizes what is the object of discussion, right? What is the subject of discussion, such that one knows what belongs in that point of discussion and what doesn't belong. This is where it brings in one of the methods, or one we can say one of the word here I'm thinking about is pedagogy, a way of teaching, a way of education which the ulama used or utilized when they were teaching the different sciences, and that is the method of the al-mabadi al-ashara, right? The 10 foundational investigations. We won't go through all of them. I just wanted to mention one, which is the mawdu', right? Which is the subject matter of a particular discipline. And why is this important? It's because it allows us to focus our efforts and to know, okay, this ilm, this particular discipline, what is it speaking about? And once we know that, we know what belongs in that discussion and what doesn't belong, right? So what's an example of a subject matter of a particular discipline? So we have ilm al-tibb, for example, which we know is medicine. So the ulama, or the scholars of medicine, we're speaking about medieval medicine right now, right? What was the subject matter of the science of medicine? Well, it was al-badan, the human body, right? But the human body from a particular perspective, right? Al-badan min haythu as-sihhati wal marad, right? The human body from the perspective of health and sickness. So that's the subject matter of ilm al-tibb. So whenever anyone was speaking about the discipline of the science of medicine, then they would always have to be speaking about something related to the human body, but also something related to health or something related to sickness. Anything outside of that, right? Anything outside of that would be termed as in not part of the discussion, and it would be a vice. Right? It would not be a good thing to be discussing something like that within a discussion of medicine. And likewise, to include as much as possible, as much all knowledge, without any neglect of anything related to the human body, from the perspective of sickness, from the perspective of health and sickness. Another interesting example is the subject matter of the science of fiqh, right? The science of Islamic law. What is the subject matter of the science of Islamic law? Well, it speaks about human actions, af'al al-mukallafin, human actions, but from what? But not. It's not anything related to human actions, right? Human actions with respect to what is permissible, what is impermissible, what is valid and what is invalid. So, for example, when someone says, as-salatu fard, right? As-salatu fard. This is a statement of within, right? This is a statement within the science of fiqh. Why? Because it's speaking about as-salah. As-salah are actions, actions that are done. And it's also with respect to what is permissible and impermissible. Because when someone says something is fard, what does that mean? Well, it means that it is now impermissible to leave, right? It must be done. So now, so for example, when someone says as-salatu, right? When someone says as-salatu, or we can speak in the English. When someone says prayer, and let's say when we say, for example, prayer is good. Prayer is good for relaxation. Right? When someone says prayer is good for relaxation, just to think about this, is that and someone says this is, and this statement occurs in a discussion of fiqh. Well, someone would say, well, this is not sound, or this is not part of good excellence of intellection. Why is that? Because this statement, although it's about actions, it's not related to permissibility or impermissibility or validity or invalidity, right? Rather, it's speaking about things which are things that provide relaxation, which are not directly related to the statements of fiqh. Okay, so what would be a good exercise for someone who is studying any different discipline? It doesn't have to be just the Islamic disciplines. Is to always be aware what is the subject matter of the discipline that I am studying, right? So that one can focus their efforts on studying that science or studying that discipline, such that they study what they have to do, such that they study what they have to study within that particular discipline. They don't neglect anything which is important, but at the same time, they do not introduce what shouldn't be introduced. Okay. So now, the commentator will speak about. So we have this virtue of excellence of intellection, right, where someone examines a topic to the extent that it should be examined. Now, what are the vices of deficiency and what are the vices of excess of this particular virtue? Well, it says here, the commentator says, طرف التفريط قصور الفكر عن تعقل تمام المطلوب. Right. So what is it? It's basically it's a shortcoming of thought. Right. One is not thinking enough, and قصور الفكر عن تعقل تمام المطلوب. Right, as in someone has a shortcoming in their thinking about the completeness of what they are investigating. Essentially, essentially, let's use an example, right? Let's use an example. Someone is studying the science of fiqh, and they know that the subject matter of the science of fiqh is actions of the morally responsible, right? So let's say the subject matter of fiqh is everything under the sun that is related to the actions of the morally responsible. What's an example of deficiency? Is that someone has not quite uh, uh, understood that, okay, well, within the actions of the morally responsible is, let's say, we could say the actions of a human with their employer. Let's say, for example, let's just, the first example that came to mind, because the way you act with your employer, or the way you act with your employees if you're a manager, this is part of human actions. So fiqh also deals with that, right? So fiqh is not just a science, or not just a discipline, is not just a discipline that deals with just, let's say, acts of worship, right? It's not a science that only, it's not an Islamic discipline that deals purely only with the acts of worship, right? So having that sort of understanding would be a form of a vice of deficiency, right? Where the virtue of husn tasawwur, or excellence of intellection, would be where someone understands, okay, well, the science of fiqh actually deals with the entire spectrum of every sort of action that could come from a morally responsible individual. So that's an example of the vice of deficiency. Now, what about the vice of excess, right? And you've probably been able to guess already. وطرف الإفراط صرف الفكر إلى تعقل أمور زائدة على المطلوب. Right. So what is the vice of excess? Is that one directs their thought to the intellection or the thinking of things that are more than they actually need. Right. So let's say we're speaking about fiqh, right? About actions of the morally responsible, right? But suddenly now we start speaking about we're not speaking anymore about actions, but let's say we're speaking about objects, right? Or we're speaking about things which are beyond the ability of the human, right? All of these things now are no longer, right? No longer in the discipline of fiqh. So someone who starts thinking about those things would then be part of a vice of excess. And this often happens, it says, وَذَلِكَ لِقُوَّةِ جَرَيَانِ الذَّكَاءِ وَقُصُورِ الْقُوَّةِ الْمُمَيِّزَةِ النَّافِذَةِ بَيْنَ مَا يَهُمُّهُ وَلَا يَهُمُّهُ. Yep. Okay, so why does that happen? That's because of the strength of one's quick-wittedness. Right, so someone can be someone can be very intelligent in the sense that their mind is very, very active and they are able to think in a very quick way. However, what they haven't developed yet is the ability to differentiate between what they need to know and what they don't need to know. What is concerning for them and what is not concerning for them in a particular discipline. Right. So yeah. Okay. So that is the example here for the vice of excess, for excellence of intellection. Okay, so that was the discussion on the fourth precondition of wisdom, which was excellence of intellection, namely the examination of things to an appropriate extent. And it's clear the vice of deficiency is where someone does not examine a topic to the extent which is appropriate, right? And we spoke about how fiqh, right? An example was fiqh. It's a discipline that deals with the whole spectrum of human actions, and someone should not think of it just as a discipline which deals with a small just a certain aspect of human action. Rather, it deals with everything. And then once again, the vice of excess is where someone thinks that fiqh deals with things that it doesn't deal with, right? And this is actually interesting because which kind of highlights as well the wisdom behind the pedagogy of the ulama. What do I mean by that? Is that when someone studies Islam, right, they study Islam from the perspective of the fard ayn, right? They have to know what they have to believe, right, in their minds. They have to know what they need to do with their bodies, which is fiqh, right? And then they have to know what they need to be at in terms of the states of their heart, right? Those three dimensions of the human. So that highlights that the science of fiqh as a study is restricted in the sense that it can't give you everything that the human soul needs, right? So it would be, why am I bringing this up? Because it would be a vice, right, of excess of excellence of intellection if someone came to the incorrect conclusion that fiqh was a particular science that would be able to give them guidance on the whole spectrum of we can say on what a human needs with respect to traveling this path towards the next life, because they need more than just fiqh. They need education to protect their heart from the diseases of the heart, but at the same time they also need an education for them to know what they need to know with respect to their beliefs, right? So that is the discussion related to the fourth precondition of wisdom, which is excellence of intellection, and that brings us to the fifth, which is suhulatu ta'allum. The fifth precondition of wisdom is ease of learning. Namely, what is the definition of ease of learning? Namely, the soul's habit of understanding the desired result with little effort. Okay? So we can see, we've spoken about preconditions in which the intellect, right? The intellect has a habit, has the ability very easily to come to the correct conclusion, right? And then also this can be done very quickly. But now, what is the fifth virtue? It can be done with little effort, right? It comes with little effort, because we know that things which require effort tires out, right? Tires out the human. So this is, we can think about this virtue of suhulatu ta'allum, where someone is able to learn, essentially understanding the desired result, understanding what they need to understand, but this occurs with little effort, and it's something very easy for someone to do. So let's read the section from the commentary. So he actually jumps straight into the discussion on the vice of deficiency and the vice of excess. So it says here, وَهِيَ فَضِيلَةٌ فَلَهَا طَرَفَانِ, right? So ease of learning is a virtue, therefore it has two vices, right? The vice of deficiency and the vice of excess. تَفْرِيطُهَا تَصَعُّبُ التَّعَلُّمِ عفوا تفريطها تصعب التعلم بحيث يتعذر أو يتعسر عليه الوصول إلى المطلوب كمن يرمي الغرض ويقف سهمه دونها لنقصان في القوة. Okay, uh, so the vice of deficiency is you could say it's quite obvious. It is difficulty in learning, right? So ease in learning is the virtue, and then difficulty in learning is the vice of deficiency, such that it's extremely difficult for this particular person to arrive to the desired conclusion, right? What do we mean by the desired conclusion? We, as a human, you desire a conclusion when you realize that there is something that you don't know, right? When someone tells you, when someone tells you, okay, I'm going to study the science of fiqh, for example, and then you realize, okay, but what is that? So now you desire to know something, right? So someone who has the vice of difficulty of learning, it's very difficult for them to reach, right? It's very difficult for them to reach essentially to reach conclusions, which is to basically gain knowledge of things which they do not know. كَمَنْ يَرْمِي الْغَرَض وَيَقِفُ سَهْمُهُ دُونَهَا, like someone who is aiming to shoot an arrow to a target, but what happens? The arrow basically strikes the ground before the target because of a deficiency in the intellect. Then we have the deficiency, the vice of excess now. وَإِفْرَاطُهَا مُبَادَرَةُ الْقُوَّةِ إلى المطلوب حيث لا يستثبت صور المبادئ والمقدمات فلا يوجد في ذهنه المطلوب إلا ظنا للغفلة عن مبادئه فصار كمن يعدو إلى المقصد أو إلى المقصد لكن لا يلتفت إلى أمارات الطريق فلا يهتدي إليها مرة أخرى. Okay, so this is interesting. So here we're speaking about the vice of excess with regards to learning. And this is mubadaratul quwwa. But maybe before we speak about that, I wanted to mention a little bit about the process of learning, which the ulama of Islam it shows in the curriculums which are taught throughout the Muslim world and have been taught for centuries. So there is something in the Islamic learning tradition which is called the matan, or something called the foundational text. What is the foundational text? The foundational text is basically a text which the beginner of a science would study, which summarizes the main discussions and the main issues of a particular science. So for example, in the science of fiqh, right, we have, what's an example of a matan? An example of a matan is the Mukhtasar al-Quduri. Right, so the Mukhtasar al-Quduri contains all of the primary discussions of fiqh, divided into its various chapters. So for example, the first chapter is going to be the chapter of Tahara, right? And then there's the chapter of Salah, and then the chapter of Zakah, right? So there are various chapters, and finally ending with the chapter on inheritance, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a matan basically explores basically summarizes all of the main issues of a particular science in a very summarized way. But what does it mean in a very summarized way? Uh, it means that, for example, right, a matan, right, or a foundational text will only speak about the very essential matters, right? So, for example, it would speak about, it would speak about what are the fara'id of wudu, right? What are the pillars of wudu, right? Which we know from in the Hanafi madhab. These are basically the washing of the face, the washing of the arms, the wiping of a quarter of the head, and the washing of the feet, right? Those four. However, what a foundational text doesn't go into are we can say the reasoning, the evidence, right? The we can say the methodology that exists behind affirming these particular rulings. These are not covered in the mutun. These are not covered in the foundational texts, right? So what? How does ta'allum? How does learning occur in a traditional way? Is that a student would first study these foundational texts. They will go through the entire, you could say, all of the chapters of fiqh, and then they would study it again, right from the beginning, tahara all the way to inheritance. But now a book which is at a slightly higher level, right? Perhaps it still doesn't go through evidence, but it goes through rulings in a more detailed way. And then a third book in more detail, fourth book in more detail, right? So this is so every time a student reads a new book, they would be revising at the same time, but also taking material at a deeper and more advanced level. So this is a very brief introduction into how learning has existed for centuries in the Islamic tradition. Why did I bring that up? I bring that up because the vice of excess, right? The vice of excess in terms of learning is that someone jumps right to the end, the most advanced book, and basically skips all of the introductions and all of the introductory material, right? Such that what happens? Such that they think that they know, but they actually don't know. Why? Because the initial introductory material, the initial the initial material that the student needs to know before they can understand the much more advanced material is not there at all, right? So that's actually something which is really important for learning today. Unfortunately, this is not just myself saying that. This actually exists in modern universities where beginner students, students who are undergrad, unfortunately they would be studying studying material which only PhD students of that particular science should only be studying. So just to be aware of that, right? Just to be aware of that when we study, when we learn, we need to take things step by step, right? We need to make sure that we learn the foundational material. We need to make sure that we're learning we need to make sure that we're not jumping beyond the introductory material before learning it. Because that is not a type of learning which results in certainty, right? Rather, it only results in in dhann or speculation or not firm certainty. Okay, so that is the discussion on what we call on the fifth precondition to wisdom, which is ease of learning, which is namely the soul's habit of understanding the desired result with little effort. And this brings us to the end of this lesson, and we will explore the sixth and seventh precondition to wisdom, and the seventh is the final one in the next lesson, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.